We're looking at the last two chapters of Ecclesiastes, which is the end-of-life journal that Solomon has written. Solomon was the king of Israel, possibly the most successful as far as power and wealth is concerned. And he did very well at the beginning of his life as being a good and godly king, but he drifted away from that, and later on, he wasn't doing so well emotionally and mentally and spiritually, and so he writes this journal. And he says over and over again, looks back on life and he says, what was the point? It just seems like life is kind of a waste of time. I don't really get what it was all about. And in chapters 11 and 12, he gives some advice to those who are reading and those who are listening. And he says, here's how I advise you to approach life. Light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all. All stages of life are good, whether you're young or old or somewhere in between. It's all good, but keep this in mind. Remember the days of darkness, for there will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. He's saying, old age is just up ahead, you young people, and it's not for sissies. So live with the understanding that it's coming, but in the meantime, enjoy all of those good things that youth makes possible. He says, you who are young, be happy while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart, and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. There are umpteen websites that you can go to, talking to young people and saying, don't blow the chance you've got. There are things you can do now that you're not going to be able to do later on. Don't miss the chance to do these things. And so you need to go travel, and you need to go bungee jump, and all of these things that you've got the energy and the vitality to experience now, because your body is strong. You're relatively pain-free. Don't put off until tomorrow the things that you're going to be able to enjoy today. Last night, I went to a concrete busting party at my son's house. He tore out a concrete stairway in front of his house, and he had these big chunks, and so he invited a bunch of guys over to bust it up with sledgehammers. And everybody there was in their 30s except for me. And so we spent some time swinging sledgehammers. And, of course, I had to keep up with the guys, and I can guarantee you that probably these young guys this morning got up and went running, and I got up and took Advil. So that's the difference. So young people, take advantage of your strength and your energy and do the things that may not be possible later on in life. You know, sometimes we make the choice between, okay, I've got now, as a young person, you say, I've got energy, but I don't have money. Later on, I'm going to have money, but I'm not sure I'm going to have the energy. So which one should I go with? I'd say go with the energy and no money, all right? Now, don't go into crazy debt. Don't cripple yourself early on by spending money you don't have. But if you want to do it now and figure out the money. Personally, in our lives, Marilyn and I decided, and I decided especially, that I wanted to be a young dad. We got married in our early 20s, and I thought, yeah, I want to be able to do everything my kids do, especially when they're teenagers, and get out there and rough and tumble. And so we decided to have kids when we didn't have two nickels to rub together. We had no money. But, you know, I was young and dumb enough, I didn't even consider that. That wasn't even factored in. I just thought, everybody has kids. You pay for them somehow. And we did. It worked out. It worked out great. And so Solomon says, yeah, go for the adventure in life. Follow the ways of your heart when you're young. I really like the way he phrased that. And keep in mind that the decisions and the choices that you're making today are going to impact you down the line, for good or for bad. It makes a difference later on. You may have heard of something called the butterfly effect. This is a theory that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, that exponentially that disturbance in the air multiplies to where that could cause a tornado in Mississippi someday. Well, that's how the theory goes. Well, that's how life goes. When you look at the decisions you make when you're young and you're flapping your wings, it can have repercussions later on. There's a decision that I made when I was a junior in college. I had a good buddy, one of my very best friends, Steve Wessner, came to me and he said, let's drop out of school for at least a semester, maybe more, and let's just go backpacking out west. And I came that close to doing that. That was so tempting to me. But I didn't do it. It would have been great. I am sure we would have had a blast. But as I look back on that, I think if I had done that, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you today. My life would be entirely different than what it is now. I wouldn't have married Marilyn. I wouldn't have the kids that I have. I may be preaching somewhere, but I wouldn't be preaching here. And I have no regrets that I didn't go on that trip because I'm really pleased with the way life has gone. I like how it's been. I like how it is. And I wouldn't change a thing. But it's crazy when you sit down and you think, one little nuance of difference can send you in a completely different trajectory in life. The lifestyle that you live when you're 20 and 30 and 40 can impact the quality of your life when you're 50 and 60 and 70. In spite of your blast furnace metabolism now, young people, what you eat now can make a big difference in the quality of your life later on. I used to, when I was in college, on Sunday when they would shut down the cafeteria, we'd go and hunt of food. We'd go to McDonald's. And I am not exaggerating, I would have 2 Big Macs, a large fry, a chocolate milkshake, and an apple pie. And when dinner rolled around, we went looking for cheap pizza. I do not do that anymore. I can't get away with doing that anymore. Things change in the metabolism. How many of you sat too close to the speakers in rock concerts in the early days, and now your hearing isn't quite what it was back then? Flossing now, young people, can make a big difference as to how many teeth you have in later life. I'm evangelistic about flossing. It makes such a difference in your trip to the dentist these days. Saving for the future is a good idea to start when you're young. The magic of compound interest is amazing if you start early enough. But if you wait until you're 55 and go, I might be retiring when I'm 65, that is not the time to start thinking about that, according to the guys on Simply Money. So take advantage of the days of your youth. I'll get to you when the service is over, okay? And we'll have a long talk, buddy. I know who he is, and we're good friends, okay? Take advantage of the days of your youth with the understanding that a day of reckoning is coming. Because up to this point, you might say, so, okay, you're saying some helpful things here, but I could listen to Dr. Phil or watch The View or Simply Money and pick up a lot of what you're saying. So where does God come into all of this? Well, Solomon says, know that for all these things, in the way that you live your life and make your decisions, God will bring you into judgment. Younger people sometimes think that the teen years and the young adult years are the best times to forget God, to party, to live a little, to experiment, and maybe come back to God later on when you get all that out of your system, when you've had your fun and you're ready to settle down. But believe it or not, if you will include God in your equation of life in those young years, you will find that life is more exciting, more fun, more full of adventure, with none of the nasty side effects of riotous living. God will enhance your life in ways that you will have no ability to understand if you go it alone and on your own. Judgment is coming. There will be a day when we will stand before God and He will take into account how we have invested ourselves in this gift of life that He has given us. And the younger we understand that, the better. Jesus made it very clear what the standard of judgment is going to be. If you go back and look at the words or the recording of Matthew, he recorded the words of Jesus in chapter 25 of his gospel. Jesus said, life is like a master who went off to do some business, and he entrusted some of his resources to 3 servants. He gave it to them, and he said, I want you to take this, understand the value of it, the importance of it, and I want you to spend it. I want you to invest it in the way that you know will make me happy. That's according to my value system. So he left and he came back, and two of the servants did well. They understood the mind of the master, and they invested in things that brought about a great return. But there was one servant that didn't do that, a very foolish servant, and so he was reprimanded in this accounting that was given when the master came back. And so Jesus is saying, yes, that's the picture of life. And he says to us, whether we're young or whether we're old, do you understand what a valuable thing it is that I have given you the gift of life and all the things that come with it, all the blessings that come with that? And I expect you to take that and appreciate it and understand how I want those things to be invested and to do it according to the way that you know will make me happy and according to the way that you know will benefit the lives of other people. Because he goes on in that chapter and he says, here's what I mean by investing life in the way that I meant for you to. That is, you invest it in the lives of other people. You look around and see who has a need, who needs some help, who needs some encouragement, who needs a blessing in life. You look for those people, and you take this gift of life, and you put yourself second, and you put other people first. And that's when the blessings come. That's when the fun comes. That's when the adventure comes. That's how life is to be lived, Jesus says. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. The best choices and decisions in life, before the days of trouble come, are always made not just with God in mind, but with God smack dab in the center of your life, calling every shot. That's when life is good and full of meaning. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. What Solomon is saying here in chapters 11 and 12 as he finishes up this journal, he's saying, keep the timeline of life in mind. Life is linear. Life has a beginning, and it has an end point. It doesn't go on and on. I live with the hopefulness that I'm going to live a long life. I've done the math, and it could be that I'm going to have another 25 or 30 years here, and maybe I'll get to see great-grandchildren. I don't know. I'm having such a good time with grandkids. I can't wait to see how much fun great-grandkids are. So that's my best-case scenario as to how life might end up. But one thing for sure, the end will come. It's going to close out. And that's a perspective that I have to keep in mind in order to live my life wisely and properly. Live with the end in mind. And you might say, well, that's morbid. Who wants to walk around thinking about death all the time? It isn't morbid. It's reality. And it's what creates the proper framework for life so that we appreciate life and live it in the very best way. And God is the one who shows us how to do that. It's the constant reminder that the biggest decision and the choices that I have to make are the ones that alter and determine how I'm going to spend eternity when this life is over. The next life is coming. And so there's two ways that I need to look at life. First of all, I need to look at it with at least one eye on the future. I might live that 25, 30 years. And so I have to plan for that responsibly so that I can take care of myself and take care of my wife when my life situation changes someday. Live with the possibility that life might be long. But also with both eyes, I need to keep my mind on the fact that it could end tomorrow. It could end today. And be ready for that as well. And to live responsibly in that reality as well. So that no matter what happens, whether it's 30 years or whether it's today, I'm ready. I've prepared myself. What we do in this life has everything to do with what happens in the life to come. I think Randy Shivers pretty well covered the metaphors that Solomon used in chapter 12 in verses 2 through 5 when he compares old age to these different things. And essentially, he's saying, old age is rugged. Your vision gets dim. Your strength decreases. Your teeth wear out. Your hearing isn't so good anymore. You don't hear the birds sing like you used to. You're more cautious. You ponder stepping down off of a curb. It's kind of like the fall and winter that comes after the summer. He says the grasshoppers begin to drag themselves around. The flies slow down. Now, Solomon doesn't say that, but that's one of the things I like about fall. The flies slow down, and you can finally swat them. Your friends start to pass away. You go to more funerals than you ever went to before. And so his message is this: old age is coming. Death is coming. Get ready. Be ready for it. Young people can have a hard time accepting or understanding the reality of death. And I suppose all people can have that difficulty in understanding how inevitable it is that life will end. And we all say it, we mouth the words, sure, we're all going to die. Everybody dies, we know that. But do we really understand that and live accordingly? When I looked at life when I was 20 years old, when I looked at my life where I'm at now, and if I compared that to an hourglass, I would look at that and think, as I looked at all the sand piled up on the top side, I would think, the age that I am now, I would think that is a zillion light years away. That's just not even going to happen. That's too far out to even think about. And now, as I look at the hourglass, there's more sand on the bottom than there is on the top. When did that happen? It goes so fast, and it's picking up speed. And that's reality. I'm closer to the end than I've ever been before. Anthony Campolo one time was teaching a course. He's a college professor, a very famous evangelical preacher, teaching a course in a college class on existentialism, and he asked his students, one by one, he wanted to ask them what effect the inevitability of death had on the way that they were living their lives now. So he was talking to 18, 19, 20-year-old students. And so they all went around. And there was one middle-aged lady in his class who waited until everybody else was done, and then she spoke up and she said, really, none of you know what you're talking about. She said, one time I went to an organ concert where one of the keys got stuck. At first, I hardly noticed it. It was only during the pauses in the music that one could faintly hear its sound. But as the concert progressed, the sound of the stuck note got louder and louder until it was no longer possible to enjoy the music. That one note ruined everything. That's the way the reality of death has affected me. When I was younger, I only thought about it at those times when I had nothing else to think about. In the melancholy pauses of my existence, I would reflect on the fact that someday I might die. But as the years passed, the awareness of my death became more and more pronounced. I came to be aware of it not only during the pauses, but also in the midst of my everyday routine activities. Eventually, that awareness became so powerful that it has permeated everything I do and think and rendered me incapable of enjoying anything. And the class went silent because they knew she was right. They did not understand the meaning of death. Well, that's where Solomon ended up. He says, remember him, remember God, before the silver cord is severed. He's talking about death. And the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, and the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. And he concludes by saying, again, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Solomon is agreeing with that lady in the class. The awareness of his impending death is so powerful that it has rendered his life pointless from where he stands. And why is that? I mean, he calls our attention to God there, and he says accurately, yes, the body goes to the ground, the spirit goes to God, but why is he looking at it as such an empty thing, as the end of all things? Because much earlier in life, he pushed away from God. And he went off on a trajectory that moved him further and further away from God. And that's what he was left with, a life that was empty. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so again, Solomon's greatest great-great-grandson is going to bail us out here and pick up where Solomon left off and say it doesn't have to be that way. Jesus, our Savior, our Messiah, is the one who assures us that living our lives does not have to be overshadowed by death, but instead we can regard death as simply the usher. It's simply the doorway. It's simply the step from this life, which God makes so very good, into the next life, which he makes even better. We can't even imagine what it's going to be like. And Jesus clarifies that this life has everything to do with what happens or does not happen in the next life when death comes. Present choices impact eternal results. And Jesus says this. He says, therefore, enter through the narrow gate in life. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. And I am that narrow road, and I am that small gate. I'm the way. If you want to find life in this life, and if you want to find life in the next, the decision you have to make, the choice that you have to make and be the correct one is to follow me. There's a lot of choices we can make throughout life, when we're young and when we're old. Some of them don't make any difference. We can recover from even bad choices. But there's one choice in life that we've got to get right. And that is, who do you believe Jesus is? And what are you going to do about that belief? And are you going to submit to him and follow him? And give him full control of your life for the rest of your life, because that is where life is found, and only through him. He was so clear about that. Make sure you get it right, and do it while you're young. And you might say, well, I'm not young anymore. Well, you know what? You're as young as you're ever going to be again. Today, this is your day of youth. This is it. And this is the day you need to make that decision, because you don't know if you've got tomorrow. We have a tendency, some people have a tendency to put off making a decision to submit to Christ, figuring that they've got a whole lifetime to do that. People comfort themselves with a parable that Jesus told. It's called the parable of the laborers, where there's this man who owns this vineyard, and he goes out into the marketplace and he hires people to come work for him. He goes at the beginning of the day and he says, if you'll work in my vineyard and pick fruit, then I will pay you this wage. And they go and they work. Well, he doesn't have enough workers, so he goes at noon and hires more people. Comes even toward the end of the day and hires people. It's time, at the end of the day, it's time to pay everybody. Everybody's gathered together. He pays the ones who started at the beginning. He pays them the same wage that he pays people who came at the end of the day. And the ones who came at the beginning of the day don't like it. They say, well, that's not fair. We worked a lot longer than these people did. What's up with that? And the master says, quit whining. We agreed for a certain wage, and I gave it to you. Don't complain, because I'm gracious to other people. And some people look at that and you say, see, it doesn't matter when you do it, as long as you do it. I think I'll postpone that. I think I'll put that off to maybe a deathbed conversion. Jesus never intended for us to understand that from that parable. What he was saying was, first of all, to the Hebrew people, you shouldn't resent the fact that God is going to welcome Gentile people into the kingdom simply because you've been a part of God's history and they haven't. Yes, they're coming late to the game. But God is gracious, and Jesus Christ is welcoming everyone into his kingdom. It's an emphasis of the goodness and the graciousness of God. But Jesus never once suggested that postponing a decision to follow him was a safe or a smart thing to do. He would never offer comfort for a decision like that. You know, there was a time when a very young man came to him, a wealthy young man with a lot of life in him, came and he thought he wanted to follow Jesus. And Jesus said, all right, here's what you do. Go sell everything you've got. Get rid of all the distractions in your life. bless some poor people with that and then come follow me. Probably said, I could use a good, energetic guy like you. Jesus was 33 years himself, 33 years old. And the young man decided not. And Jesus didn't go running after him and say, okay, that's fine. You go out and live your life and you'll probably come back to me someday. And that's okay. No, it says that Jesus watched him go sadly because he knew that young man wasn't going to come back. That this was an eternity-altering decision that this young man had made. He was at a fork in the road that was taking him away from Jesus as fast as he could go. And it made Jesus very sad. That was the day he needed to make that choice. He told another parable about a man. He was a very wealthy man and was providing for everything in this life and stockpiling, storing things for a future that never happened. He provided everything for his physical future, and he died too soon, and he had never given thought to what's going to happen in the next life. And Jesus said, what a foolish thing to do. What does it profit somebody if they gain everything that this world has to offer, but they don't give any thought to where they're going to spend eternity? And I have to think he was thinking of that rich young man when he told that story. If you're on the brink of following Jesus, you've been thinking about it, you've been wrestling with it, I don't know, back and forth, today is the day. You will never regret the decision that you make today to find life in the only one that can give you life, Jesus Christ. It's the day you know that you have. Today you are as young as you will ever be again. Today is the day to submit to Christ and understand what he meant when he said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes into a relationship with God. No one has an assurance of eternity with God unless you go through me. I'm the narrow way, I'm the narrow door. Trust me. Trust me, I can get you there, but I'm the only one who can. It's the decision that you don't want to get wrong. You know, Jim Helton, he gave me permission to share this. He was in that first video that we showed on the first Sunday of Ecclesiastes, and he said the one regret that he had, and I don't know how many years ago it was, Jim, 10 years ago, I'm not sure, when you came to Christ. How many? 13 years ago. And what were you, in your 70s then? In your 60s, all right. And as you look back on that, that's pretty young, wasn't it? From today's perspective, maybe. The one regret that Jim has is that he didn't do it sooner. Because life can be good without Jesus. It can be. But isn't it so much better when he's in the middle of it and when he's directing life? It's so much better. You know, and I have no regrets. Even as a young person, I don't know, you'd probably think I was a nerd. I was a nerd. I was a nerd growing up. And there was just a lot of stuff I didn't get into. And that doesn't make me so special. It makes me a nerd for one thing, I guess. But you know what? I have no regrets that I pretty much just invited Jesus in to call the shots very early on in my life. Because I do not see how it could be improved. It's been full of fun. It's been full of adventure. I wouldn't change a thing. Jesus is the one who makes all the difference as to what life can be. Now all has been heard, Solomon says. And here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. And Jesus is the one who fills every deed and every day with meaning. Rich Mullins wrote a song. He's a gospel songwriter, singer. Some of you are probably familiar with him back in the 80s, early 90s. Wrote a song called Live Right. Pull it up on YouTube. It's fun to listen to. But it says, don't hold out. Don't let these chances pass you by. Live like you'll die tomorrow. Die knowing you'll live forever. Love like you'll leave tomorrow. Believing love lasts forever. Live right. Now, I don't know how long Rich Mullins thought he was going to live when he wrote that song. He was a very young man when he rolled his Jeep on an interstate in Chicago, Illinois. And life ended much sooner than he anticipated. But he was ready. Didn't matter. because he was ready. He made the right choice so that he was prepared for that. And so as we live life in the right way, no matter what age we are, impending death doesn't have to be the boogeyman. Impending death doesn't have to be the joy killer that it can become for some people. It all depends on how we're spending and investing each day, how we're spending and investing this day, and who we have called into our life to be the master of our lives. How you spend today has everything to do with where you will spend eternity. And so we're going to give you an opportunity to respond this morning. In the old days, we would call this an invitation hymn. If you've been around church a lot, well, this isn't going to be a hymn. It's just a song that we're going to sing that's going to give you an opportunity to step up. And I know we don't do this often, but we're going to do it today. If you want to step up here forward and say, yeah, today is the day. I've been on the brink. I've been on the verge. I've been thinking about this. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to step up, and in front of God and everybody, I'm going to say, I believe that Jesus Christ is my Savior and the only one who can take me where I need to go for eternity. I'm going to tell God I'm sorry for my sins. I'm going to be baptized. I'm going to publicly be immersed in water in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which is symbolic of our death, burial, and resurrection and identification with Christ. I'm going to do it today. Today is the day. Do it. Yeah, it feel weird. It's unusual. Just do it. Just do it. If God's pushing you, saying, yeah, today's the day, do it. Maybe you want to have a conversation about it, and that's okay too. Call me up. Send me an email. I am so flexible when it comes to having a conversation about submitting yourself to Christ. Let's have that conversation, okay? And maybe the rest of you, most of you are all in maybe. I'm preaching to the choir here, saying, yeah, I've been a follower of Christ forever, and it's great, and amen, and all that. Well, you know somebody that isn't, and they need to hear from you. Wishful thinking and living hopefully that somehow they're going to apprehend Christ apart from you, hoping that's going to happen. There's just no guarantee that's going to happen. It could be that you're the only way that's going to happen. So look for the opportunity to share this good news for them that makes every difference in life and makes every difference in eternity. This is the day to decide to do that.